Hi. No, there's no problem with your screen. You didn't lose color. We're going to critique the Grayscale assignment, so I thought it was reasonable to have the opening card be in Grayscale. So let's get on with this and take a look and see what we have. Well, first up, we have this shot of a toned waterfall scene. It's an interesting bit of toning. It's like a split toning effect. Looks a lot like some of the old albumin prints in its look. The conversion looks pretty good. The only thing you need to watch for, and this is true whether you're doing a conversion or whether it's the standard color issue, is blown out highlights that are losing detail where there should be detail, and potentially open shadow, or what Adams called luminous shadow detail, that is being blocked up where it's lost. If this were to simulate some old-timey photographs, then actually this could be fairly accurate, having to do with the dynamic range and contrast range. So I'm not going to get too far into that. The one thing is, if you're going to simulate old photographs and use conversions to do it, then be aware that the albumin process, especially starting at the camera capture stage, had emulsions that were so slow they wouldn't even register on our current ISO scales. So this waterfall would be a total blur. This exposure back in the 1800s would have taken well over a minute. So the look is not just the color and the contrast, it's also what's happening to motion. But this is a nice job. Let's move on. Here we have a fairly neutral grayscale image of a scene. I'm not sure where this is. I assume our main subject here is the mural and the artwork on the buildings, which appears to be quite nice. The conversion to grayscale is done really well. The exposures seem to be spot on. The only issue really is a compositional issue. If this building and or this part of the artwork is what the shot is all about, then this looks like a grain bin of some kind, or some kind of feeder bin, and the support rod here are really a problem. They're blocking off the view of what the main subject is. There's not enough of the background to tell us that this shot is about the environment. This whole area isn't the subject. By the way it's composed, it almost has to be just this wall. And if that's the case, then move in on it. And also, be careful about lines like this that I'm assuming are actually, given that the brick rows are even, should be horizontal. So watch out for things like that. Interesting coal-toned print. This was something that was fairly common in the film days, to use different colors of toners, and this coal tone, the blue tone, was pretty common. And in this case, it really adds to the drama of the scene. We do have an exposure issue, and that is this area in here with these dark trees or bushes or whatever they are really underexposed and is missing detail. That in the film days was an exposure issue. In the digital days, it's both potentially an exposure issue and a processing issue. This could probably be brought out. Let's see if we can do that. If we make a duplicate layer and we make that layer a screen layer, we discover there is all kinds of information down in that area. So I'll make this, in this case I'll make it an inverted layer mask. Use a white brush See if we can lighten just this area. So if we run our white brush in through here, we can put quite a bit more information down in those dark areas and give it some life in there. Give this environment something that is exciting to look at. Okay, let's go on. Well, this is a fascinating little tableau here, this little scene. How interesting. I don't know if this is a staged or a composited thing. What is fascinating is the light. This, on one hand, looks like an outdoor scene with a little park bench. On the other hand, this looks like an inside floor stand light with a standard light shade. It's clearly out with the trees. It's a fascinating shot, an interesting, surreal, almost metaphorical shot, something out of the old film noir genre. And I think you've done a really nice job with it. The only thing I would do is watch out for areas like this tree that are blown out. We're frequently able to put a lot of data back into shadow areas, but when you have blown out highlights, they're gone. There's nothing we can do with that. So that is an exposure issue. Be very careful about doing that. Watch the histogram. Pay careful attention to it. And try not to blow these things out. Really interesting shot. Fascinating shot. I think maybe that we could solve this. We may or may not need that whole tree in this shot. Yeah, we're starting to get a little too squeezed. It worked a little better the way you had it with all of this other area because it makes her look more alone when you're showing more of the ground around her. This is our problem, this overexposed tree. So that really needs to be toned back. But otherwise, this is a really cool shot. I like it a lot. I like your idea for it a lot. I think I would go back and rework this and make it into something that really works pretty well. Here we have an interesting shot of a building, a courtyard, with a fascinating style. The conversion is done very well. You did quite a nice job with it. The only issue is this shot is so busy with all kinds of things happening here that there's no real focal point. It's not backed out enough to give us a sense of the whole house, and it's not zoomed in enough to give us an idea of, are we really taking a look at the gate or the post that's going over it? What are we actually looking at? What are we supposed to be looking at and concentrating on? And so we're just getting some of everything. So the composition is pretty muddy in the sense that there's just too much here. But the conversion is really very, very, very well done. Nice job. This is a nice shot of these flowers here on the ground. The only problem is it looks a little bit flat. It could use here in the shadow areas, here where there should be some real black, there doesn't appear to be that quality of black. I'm going to open the levels. And there's our problem. Here we're playing out a little bit as we get to the blacks. If we bring this in just a slight bit, and turn our preview on and off, you can see that's not a huge difference, but it's enough to give a little more life into this shot. So frequently, it's those subtle things that you can do that are going to make the difference in how strong your photograph is. What you might also consider is that you could decide, I've got some things in here that are detracting. This, whatever this is, a leaf of some sort, is distracting. Here's your main shot. this cluster right in here. So could we make this stronger by simply getting rid of some distractions? Once we've lost enough of this item, it just becomes a shape in the background and we don't care really what it is. We can get rid of that post that's back there. Now we're off center just a little, so let's do this. Come up a little bit here. And now we've concentrated in on the main subject, which is this flower. We can see that it's part of a group of flowers, and the whole collection now really starts to resonate a little better. So it's some simple changes to it, like we keep harping on. Look at all of the things that are in the shot and ask yourself, where's the real shot? And what in the shot that I have is detracting from that I can get rid of? And then do that, and then get rid of it. Well, here we have a really fun shot of this young lad playing with something. It's hard to tell what, but he's certainly having a good time doing it from the look on his face. The colder tone is interesting. It really changes the character of it from what it might be if it were a warm tone or some other tone. The point of view of this shot is really interesting. When I first saw it, I was convinced that he was on the floor looking out. But now I'm looking at all of these items up in here, thinking, unless they're nailed to the wall somehow, I must be looking down on them. So this must mean that I'm looking over the top of something down onto the little boy that's either sitting or standing around this table or whatever this is. This is a really interesting use of point of view. Very, very well done. I might get rid of a little of this side over here because the action in it, the focal point of this shot, is his face and the emotion, the joy and fun that he's having doing whatever it is he's having. Some of this is okay. It indicates that it's toy time here, but we don't necessarily need all of it. We really want the viewer to look at that face and not be drawn in with some of this other stuff. So we could get rid of a little of it. Still maintain the sense of what the shot is, that it's amongst a bunch of toys. Still make use of that interesting point of view, but now truly focus in on the face, which is really what this shot's all about. This is a very nice shot, very delightful. Well, as I put in the comments, this looks like some of my neighbors. So it's a really fascinating shot. What is this? A wind vane of some kind? I see the little propeller thing on the front that makes me think that, but I truly don't know. Maybe that drives the wheel on top with all of the items the clown is supposed to be juggling. It's an interesting item that you have photographed. And the use of this kind of magenta tone to it is also interesting. It's unusual, but then the subject is unusual, so it might all work together. The only problems you've got is you really could have used a much more shallow depth of field in this case, because things like this branch that are coming through the wheel are sufficiently distracting visually that it makes it difficult to see each of these items on what I assume is the spinning wheel of the items he's juggling. So your background is really competing with you here. Use a shallower depth of field. Open up the lens. There's nothing that motion is going to have to worry about in this shot. So go ahead and use a fast shutter speed that lets you open the aperture and really concentrate on this item, because this is a clever, interesting device that we're looking at. Okay, that's it for part 1. We'll wrap this up and get on with part 2 in a moment.